We are live. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Every 2 weeks, we're doing the show. Andrew, Tyler, Betthauser, Conaxion. And Andrew, you don't have your company name, but it's Point Vector.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
could maybe add it.
Yeah. So we'll give. Let's do general chat for like a minute or two, so that people can join. And then if people have joined, tell us where you're at. So just to get started, let's do some quick intros before we get started while we're waiting for people to join. So I'm Charles Elwood at SolisMatica BI. I do data analytics. My focus is on business people, business leaders, not necessarily IT. I want to give insights to business people because that's where I came from. I was director of project management, and I was just frustrated that I couldn't make decisions immediately when I needed the data. So that's my whole purpose now, is to teach people how to use Microsoft Power BI and get their decisions right away, right? So Andrew, let's go to you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew. I have my own independent consultancy in artificial intelligence and machine learning. I really fell in love with the power of computers to help people make better decisions and do things faster. And so I like helping businesses get their start in using data, especially if they're somewhat new to it. It's a little bit different from software development. Yeah, it's just an extremely powerful tool that I'm excited that more businesses are jumping on and getting their start in it.
And we're just crazy passionate about data, as you can see. We're excited. You know, Andrew, we were chatting before the show, and Andrew's like, "This is my favorite time of the week."
It's so true.
Three people that are just passionate, love data, I love changing people's lives, love making an impact, and we're going to sit here and talk about data for an hour. Right? We do this every 2 weeks now. So, Tyler, let's jump into you, man. Tell us your story.
Everyone. Tyler, like Charles said, I am principal consultant at Conaxion, my own independent consulting firm, largely focused around decision intelligence. I've really kind of latched on to that science and enabling businesses through data to make better decisions, increase sales, return on investment, things of that nature. But really helping businesses understand, get started, how they can use data, and build out some expertise, and hopefully at the end of the day, creating better everyday decisions so that that they can flourish and not only change their lives but their customers' lives.
Yeah. And we've all, we're going to talk a little bit about this today, but we've all been in the corporate world. We've all gone through that, the story of where we saw data and we wrangled it and we created some insights. And then, Tyler has a story about going on a roadshow at General Motors, right? So, Andrew, you've done some fascinating data with rail, the straightness and rails profiles. I've done all kinds of crazy data. We're taking it from, analysis in Excel or on paper, highlighting pieces of paper and grouping the data and then just automating it at Power BI. So we've got some great stories today about how you can change your organization too. So I'm going to go into, my journey is kind of interesting. I'm just going to talk a little bit about, some of the resources that are out there on data while we wait for people too. So let's go into the next slide. So we're doing something a little different today. Typically, Andrew, Tyler, and I just wing it. Right? we join and then we just talk about stuff we're passionate about. But today we actually spent some time last week on Friday and mapped out kind of a structure and some questions. So if you're at a big corporation or a business leader, we're going to talk about some of our experiences and how we tackle data for people. So, and Andrew, can you comment in the LinkedIn so that people know that this is live? So that typically helps too. So I am doing a beta masterclass, and Tyler and Andrew, I invite you to sign up on my website because I want to teach people the proper way to, I've spent a year and a half binge studying this stuff, and I still see people, incorrectly data modeling, right? So I want to do kind of a free class to get this basics out there. Be 20%, 80-20 rule, 20%, get you started. And if you sign up on my website, there's a little sign up halfway through. We're going to build this class together and really make an impact. So if you guys are interested, jump in. And then the first, 20 people will be kind of my beta group. And we're going to build this class together to make a change in the world, right? And provide this free for everybody. Also, a year and a half ago, I was like, I'm not an influencer. I'm here in Holland, Michigan, and I don't have a story to tell, right? And Andrew, Tyler, you guys know with this live show, we created this from nothing, right? And so my YouTube channel has 100 subs, and my kids think I'm the coolest dad in the world, right? They're like, wow, Dad, you have 100 subscribers? Like, that's crazy. You're the coolest dad. So not only do I get the coolest dad award from my kids, but I'm achieving something that I never thought possible, which is using a medium like video. And YouTube's like the second largest search engine, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm posting videos every week, about Power BI, about fear, how data impacts companies, and I'm putting it on my YouTube channel. So my goal, 2010, what? No, 2021, end of 2021, let's get to 1,000, right?
You're in the wrong decade.
Yeah, I'm going backwards. So yeah, that's part of my MVP. I make lots of mistakes, and but I just take action, go forward. Right? So Andrew, that's a quick story. Is you posted a survey about data this morning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a quick story. A lot of people through this, but you posted a survey, and tell us a little about what your thoughts were when you posted the survey.
Yeah, I almost didn't post it. I think I've almost posted a poll on LinkedIn like 3 times now because I've always stopped myself because I had this fear of, am I asking a dumb question that people don't care about? Am I going to get anybody responding to it? I actually had a fear that if I put a bad poll out there that nobody would respond to it and it would just look bad, that I had no engagement and no audience. And fortunately there's already some people boosting my confidence by answering the poll, but I've found through answering other people's polls that they're extremely valuable sources of information. And I've actually had a lot of really good conversations start off of answering other people's polls and seeing what their results were. So don't be afraid to put that content out there.
Yeah. That's so a little story, as you can see on the screen here, my latest video on composite models, that was a result of a survey like 4 weeks ago. And the people voted, the 7 people, I think, said, we want to learn about composite models. So I recorded a video like a week later, and then I sat on it for 2 weeks because I was scared of, because I was learning all this stuff, right? I was like, man, imposter syndrome kicks in, and you're like, if I could post about composite models, what if I don't know? What if somebody posts and says, you don't know what you're talking about? I was so scared of that. But I finally just posted it, and I've gotten like 4 likes already. So it boosts your confidence, and I learn a little bit about the market. And hopefully I teach people, and they learn about composite models too, and we learn together. Right?
Well, and here's the best thing about sending in questions on shows like this and answering polls is if we see those things as signals as to what questions to answer and what's valuable to the network, right? Like we're actively trying to find things that people in our network are going to get value out of and improve their lives at work. So if there's something you want us to talk about, or something that you learned on the show, or you want us to take content in a different direction, let us know, because we are watching these things really, really close and trying to find, that sort of high value content to be able to deliver. And that makes our lives a little bit easier too, in knowing what to put out there.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Like half the time, I do these live videos. It's like, what do we talk about? And then, if people answer those surveys, I just bring the questions in. For example, this one, my friend Tom Middlestead, he sent an email, said, I have lots of data. I'm overwhelmed. This is why this show was created, was actually a comment from our audience members, right? We did the last show and they're like, I loved it. But I'm overwhelmed by data. I have so many data insights. What do I do? How do I pick the right story to tell within my organization to make a difference? So we created this, we created this video, and we're going to talk about it. Oh, but before we go, so Andrew, your question is how do you think data will impact the future, right? And you've got like
specifically AI. Yep.
how AI will impact the future. Will it do predictive analytics? Will it automate workflows? I think you've got 2 other questions. So help Andrew boost his confidence. Go to his LinkedIn profile, find his post, and let's vote.
Those are tough because all of those are important, and I feel like all of those are important for AI, or at least important outputs.
Yeah, the specific question asks about what you think the highest return on investment would be from automating workloads, predicting performance, enabling new offerings and features, or connecting better with customers. And yeah, like you were saying, Tyler, I think all those are super high impact. There's probably no one right answer, but I'm very, very curious to see where people think that puck is going, so we can all figure out how to best skate to that puck.
Right. And Andrew, what I put out 2 surveys out there, and LinkedIn limits it to 4. And we really want to see if there's ones beyond that, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
So Andrew,
I might have even left one out on purpose to see if other people are picking up on it. I don't know.
So a challenge for audience members, go to Andrew's survey and try to figure out which one he left out. So, and then Tyler, let's go to you. So if there's audience members out there, business leaders interested in AI, what is the one question that you have for them? And maybe they can, write the comments below or to the side here or below.
I would say, like, in a perfect world, what would you want AI and machine learning to do, right? Like, if you had innumerable resources and ideas, what would you want automated, or what would you want, what would make your life easier? Because in a lot of ways, AI, that's what it's there for, right? It's supplement us and what we're doing in the world.
Oh, that's a great question. Where are you wasting time? How can we make your life easier? I think that feeds into one of the questions is how do you pick an MVP project? And one of the criteria I think is, which project will make the most impact? Or let's say you're spending hours in Excel or highlighting papers, and it takes you 2 weeks to compile the data, and you're like, this should really be easier. That would be a good MVP project potentially. Also, you need clean data. I think for an MVP, you probably want data that's pretty clean, because you could spend hours cleaning the data too. So for your first project, you might think about that is how clean is your data, and then how much impact does it make? And then we'll talk about some other things too. So let's go to the next slide. Ooh, and here it is. So picking an MVP, and Andrew, Tyler, and I talked about, there's ROI you can think through. There's implementation, and then I just added the savings to time. So let's see if we have a story to tell. So about a good project that we picked for an MVP, and I'm going to go back to. We had a process once where we were evaluating projects, and then we spent an Excel spreadsheet in email as an attachment to people, right? And we copied the world on this. I remember thinking, wow, this data is just lost. It's not compiled. It's not aggregated. And there's probably a lot of knowledge in here, and there's probably patterns in this data. But I started asking, does anybody look at the patterns? And they're like, it's an attachment. We're not going to open up 50 emails, search through for ones that all these attachments and look across the data. And so actually, I didn't use Power BI for this one. All I did was I searched through my email and I copied everything. I did this manually, and I copied everything into an Excel spreadsheet, just all this data. And then I tagged each one with a category, and then I counted them up. And here's the amazing thing. This was my epiphany, like my moment, right? I was like, wow, we are repeating mistakes over and over and over and over and over and over and over. it just happened over and over and over. And it was because the data was in Excel's attachments and hidden away, and it wasn't aggregated together in a database to analyze. So I actually just use Excel. I tag the data, I put it in a pivot chart, real simple. And I was like, look, over the past 6 months, we've repeated this problem 10 times. This is 80-20 rule. Let's fix this problem first, right? So later I moved that to Power BI and automated the process of pulling the data, instead of manually cut and pasting it into Excel, and save myself tons of data. But sometimes it works to start with something you're familiar with, like Excel, and then find the insights first, and then use that story to expand and automate it in something like Power BI. So let's jump to Andrew and then Tyler. So Andrew, do you have any secrets on how to pick an MVP, and do you have a story? And it looks like there's some audience members, so let us know if you've struggled with picking a project for your business to kind of lead the way into the future here. So Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start off with, I guess, with a story. So I had this really interesting project a couple of years back where the customer wanted to use a camera and artificial intelligence to detect some objects in a space, right? And so the question that they posed to us is, what camera do I need? What processing capabilities do I need to enable this sort of feature? And that is such a wide, or such a broad and difficult question to tackle as a whole. And so what we chose to do instead, part of that process traditionally would be you would build some sort of full system for it and then iterate your hardware over and over until you reached the design goals. But working with cameras can often be quite an expensive thing. So what we did instead is we picked a very high performing platform that we could buy off the shelf, and we used machine learning to essentially convert the really high performing camera into a bunch of different levels of performance of cameras. So instead of iterating on hardware, which is the really time consuming expensive part, we leveraged the software just by making the images worse from a very high quality input image. And we were able to use machine learning then to figure out how much impact did motion blur have on our ability to detect. That way we didn't necessarily have to go and collect new data sets for a whole bunch of different camera platforms. So yeah, sometimes spending a little money on your MVP can make a lot of the other later costs sort of disappear when you design that thing well. And I think, honestly, that's one thing that I think many businesses mess up when they look to what their MVP should be. And because MVP, I think, sort of implies with the minimal part of it, that it's got to be low cost, that it's got to be fast, and that it's got to be really, really simple. And while those are very good characteristics of an MVP, I think a lot of times you're best off asking, what's that first domino, right? Like, what's the one thing that if we were able to solve this one problem or get this one small insight, everything else sort of falls into line from there. And even if that takes longer or costs a little bit more, that might be not just a minimum viable product or process, but also the most valuable product and process, which fits the acronym as well.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I like your point about software, using software, right? Because changes in software are much lower risk, faster implementation time than hardware. So I love that point, is how do you de-risk? Minimum risk. As a company, you decide we want minimum risk on this, minimum investment, minimum change time. And with and this goes into the agile thing. Power BI is so flexible. It's software. It's agile. It's, little risk of, it's really a view of just data. So you're not going in and manipulating and changing the data. So the risk is very, very low. So that's a great point, Andrew. In terms of, de-risking your project, I'm putting a little investment up front, but keeping the risk low for change points. And that goes into this whole thing, my adventures into video, right? I started with my camera, my phone, and then I just have a cheap Logitech camera. And then, as you learn, you start with that. And as you learn, you make your mistakes. You're like, I want it to sound better. I want it to look better. Now I'm looking at a new camera. So start small, learn as much as you can. Because data is a learning journey. There's a lot to learn, and we'll talk a little bit about that, all the stuff you can learn from data and structure and stuff. But that's another point, is pick a project where you can learn about the data structures the most. It may not fail, and then we'll go to expectations too. It may not, result in hundreds of millions of dollars in savings, but your learnings could be invaluable. So great points. Anything to add, or we'll jump to Tyler real quick? And Tyler, you might have to jump off for work.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
It might be. We'll see.
Yeah. So give us, how do you pick a project? How do you get started? Do you have a story about a project that helped you see the light and say, you know what, data, AI, that's the way to go?
Yeah. When I was working at GM, in one of my first big data projects, it was very simple. Our simple domino was just a basic throughput calculation, right? How much was coming in, how much was going out. And largely that was determined by just the simple Pareto principle, right? We could use very basic brainstorming activity where we listed out all the things that we need to have every day to make daily decisions, right? If you could put yourself in someone else's shoes, what data would that person need, or what data would you need every single day to make that decision? And through that brainstorming exercise, we were able to highlight a few key KPIs for a few key dimensions that we need in order to be able to make better decisions. And one of those key decisions was just simply throughput. And once you could identify throughput, then you could understand maybe a higher level dimension or lower level dimension of, okay, after it leaves our facility, then where does that part go? Where does that next process kick off? And then you can further continue down along the, how that data flows from system to system or team to team. So yeah, I mean, I would say one of the easiest things you can start with is a Pareto of problems, a Pareto of projects, maybe sorted by how much value they provide to the organization. It's always easier to have it visualized in that part, that Pareto chart, and then start from the top thing that will provide the most value. Or if you feel it's necessary to prioritize the risky projects, then maybe that floats to the top of your Pareto and you focus on that first. But it's always better to start the thing that provides the most value for you, that can easily be quantified, or at least be quantified at all, and start working from there, right? Start from your Pareto. That's probably the best, most simplest advice I have.
No, that's a great point. I'm developing that Power BI class right now, and I'm brainstorming what will provide the most value to my audience members, to business people trying to implement Power BI or data or AI. What are the top steps? What is the most value? And I'm developing that class to that. So you guys get to be a part of that. So go sign up. Don't forget to sign up. Because you're my beta testers, right? So we have an audience member, it looks like. So if you have questions about how to pick an MVP project, what's the best way to move forward with data, we've all been through it in the corporate world, and we'd love to answer your questions. So, all right, so awesome stuff. And let's go through So I have a hero's journey. This is, you guys kind of talked about it, but maybe we can talk about it again, because there's multiple fears and multiple roadblocks and all kinds of things that come to mind when you're taking your first data journey. There's things like, do you trust the data? That happens all the time. What if I start this data project and it fails and it doesn't, it ends? That's the fear of failure, right? What if I start using something like Python or Power BI and I get stuck? Like that.
Time to go to Stack Overflow.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of questions that come up, and we've been through a lot of different situations. So I'm going to start with a story, and then we'll go through Andrew and Tyler. So I was years back, I was lucky enough to work at a company in the purchasing department, and we had multiple divisions, and the data, we connected the data, and I was part of the cleaning group. So we spent hours. I mean, we compiled all these spreadsheets, and we cleaned the data by hand, add a column, tag it with this, just to make all the data come together, right? But it was a lot of work cleaning and that, while I was doing it, I was like, man, is this going to provide value? Like, holy smokes, this is a lot of work, right? But we had this, huge team, and we were all cleaning the data, and we put it into a database. And here's the amazing thing that happened. Once you put all the data together, and you had pricing information, and you could search by product or by, what price you were paying for a certain product. I remember getting in meetings and bringing that up, and it's like, across our divisions, we have a little bit of price discrepancy, so we're going to pick the lowest price here. And, if we could level out everything and bring all the prices in line. And within seconds, I saw like tens of thousands of dollars in savings. Like, all my work just cleaning the data turned into tens of thousands of dollars. And then we did this over and over in the next meeting, in the next meeting, in the next meeting. And, we could do phone calls, and within 15 seconds of saying, this is what the data says, here's all the discrepancies, let's bring them all in line. Like, tens of thousands of dollars were just being collapsed, right? So when that happened, that was when my eyes really, I was like, wow, this data is so powerful. Like, that's an example of a project like really bringing in that type of money, right? But that was also the moment, the aha moment for me, where I was like, I need to study this stuff, because this is going to change the world. This is the kind of stuff that will change everything. So that's the story I often tell is, this is the kind of impact. If you have the data and you clean it and you put it all together, that's the kind of impact you can make for your company and your life. So that's my hero's journey. So Andrew, do you have another one? That will put you on the spot again. If not, you can pass. You can pass.
I can pass? You've never told me that before.
Yeah, that's new.
Okay. You know how many times I've stumbled through an answer going, because you put me on the spot? No, I do have a story for this one.
Yeah.
So my background is in engineering, a very, very mathematical background, and I always sought out, problems like self-driving vehicles and automated robots and computer vision, all of these cutting edge tech stuff. And in the recent year or two here, I just started getting more into business data, which I used to shrug off as being much simpler, right? Because you're not dealing with sensors and all these different technical and engineering systems. To me, it seemed like that would be easier than dealing with autonomous vehicles. But one of my first projects as a consultant, we were working with a very interesting data set. It was a company called 86 Repairs. They help restaurants manage the maintenance of their equipment. And we had all these invoices across the United States for these different maintenance requests. And there was a really simple insight that somebody in the company mentioned that said, none of our customers know what to expect when they get a bill for maintenance, right? Because all of this stuff just happens with your own business and nobody's sharing that sort of info. So by
Yeah.
them having all that info together, all we really had to do was come up with some basic filters by like region and equipment type, which didn't take long to clean up. And with a simple average, we were able to give these businesses just so much clarity in planning how much expense they were going to have potentially in a year going towards maintenance. And that really like changed my perception of the power of data from having to be this like super highly technical engineering system. You know, you got to do this crazy math and research for years on end to come up with this amazing AI product
Yeah.
into it's really about the quality of your data and asking really good questions. And that's a totally different process than what I originally started getting myself into on the engineering side. And let me tell you, it is so much more fun sitting in a room with people who care about data, talking about its direct impacts on the business and asking really good questions. Like that
Yeah.
is such a fun environment instead of sitting in front of your computer all day typing up code and wondering the next time your sensor is going to break. So that
Yeah.
was sort of my aha moment, is that there's so much value in business data and it's a lot more fun too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've had those experiences. I love those when you're in a meeting and sometimes it's the simplest thing. It's because nobody's been able to build a data model and pull that one particular filter in and see that particular pattern. And I
Yeah.
remember doing that with leads, qualified leads, and people were struggling with the database. They couldn't get the data out because there was this cloud service. They didn't know how to get the report out. And I pulled in the table and I pulled in just the categories for leads, for sales leads, qualified, et cetera. And it, boom, like it was just the implicit measures, right? It was just real simple, like drag and drop, boom. And I remember jaws dropping. And it's so much fun when that happens, when people are like, whoa, that is huge value. It didn't even take, and then the journey continues. You're like, that was just the first step. So
Yeah,
now,
questions beget questions, that's
yeah,
for sure.
what if you do this filter and you pull that in and they're like, whoa, and eyes get real big and jaws drop. So those are the aha moments that I just love. And when you're right, Andrew, when people understand that, oh my gosh, it's the whole dynamic of that meeting, everything changes. I've seen that happen too. It's like people trust the data, they see the insights, the light bulb goes off and they're ready to move
Yeah.
forward.
And when it turns into a team effort too, that's when the
Yeah.
magic really starts to begin, because, one person off on their own can generate plenty of insight, but that diversity of thought
Yeah.
is really what brings, the most value out of your data set, because I've got a way of looking at things. Charles has a way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Tyler has a completely different way of looking at things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And bringing all those together can really, really unlock that value out of the
Yeah.
data.
Oh my gosh, good stuff. And then Tyler, you got an aha moment for us?
I
That
think
moment?
my big aha moment and my excitement around machine learning and AI came from a project I worked on where the team was aggregating data from manufacturing, uh, engineering, all different kinds of places within the organization. And then we would bring it and then we would query other databases to get these pieces of feedback from customers. It could have been from a survey, it could have been from all kinds of different things like JD Power. And so we built this system around just simply going through and categorizing thousands upon thousands of pieces of feedback from our customers. And so we would spend 20, 30 hours a week sometimes across this team, just simply categorize customer feedback into buckets. And then we would take those buckets and analyze them and report out on them in order to be able to determine what we were going to ask the engineering teams to help focus on in terms of improving quality or something of that nature. And so finally, after we had automated the aggregation of data, was how do we automate of all this data and the categorization? And so the real power of AI and machine learning became extremely clear to me when we started to actually take our pre-cleaned, bucketed data and applied it to machine learning algorithms and said, in the future, we don't have to do this all the time anymore, right? We can get a certain level of accuracy in our bucketing right by just by sending it through a simple algorithm that that could learn off of our historical data. So I never got to stick around in order to see, how well it ended up in production, but I was able to be part of the team that actually helped do the testing and helped put that in place in the first place. And so that really sparked off very, simple but powerful thought was that we could automate so much manual work by being able to use very simple algorithms and applying them and driving a lot of time savings from that. So for me, that was huge. That was when I really started to get excited about machine learning and what it could do for us and help supplement our work.
Yeah, so you're taking it to you and Andrew both. So I'm at the Power BI, just the simple insights, and then you're adding machine learning and Python, and moving it, having the machine figure out the patterns, which is awesome. That's the next step to all this stuff. And I think what's interesting too is we were all in automotive, and I think data in automotive. People are like, oh, data is new and everything. It's like, no, automotive has been into data because there's, tens of thousands of cars that are being produced. And each car, what's amazing, I worked at Delphi Automotive, and we had our own semiconductor lab because cars had so many microcomputers, embedded systems inside the cars collecting data, and they were just overwhelmed with data. I mean, this was 10, 15 years ago. And they would collect that data and send it back and try to analyze the data and try to do predictive analytics. And I was working on a system that would send a message to your car, and it would pop up on your Navi screen and say, hey, we've analyzed it. We see the pattern. You got a pressure sensor on this module, blah, blah, blah. It's about to break. We've scheduled an appointment. You're under warranty, and come in on this date and get this repaired, right? We were doing predictive stuff years ago. So this is not new. This is an amazing insight too, is we've seen it from 10, 15 years ago. It's just being more commonplace now, I think, is the conversation about data and AI and predictive analytics.
Well, the tools are there now. I mean,
yeah,
you can build a model in 2 to 3 lines of code without having to hard code all the math. And that can be dangerous and really powerful at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But that was my first class. My real my mind was blown with how simple some of these models are built, but the power comes with the hyper tuning and being able to take very different variables and tweak its weight or its importance within the model itself. And again, it's all within a couple lines of code. It's just how do you apply the tool to the right problem? And if you're ever asked, well, how does that model apply to that business problem? Then you got to really understand the math and statistics around it. But there are a lot of tools out there now where it doesn't take a lot of math to understand and apply some of these things in a lot of ways. So the exponential increase in the availability of tools and making it extremely cheap to build, that's also enabled a lot of this data to finally be unlocked and the insights to finally be brought to the business users.
That's a great point. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, and the tools are like a free ride for the company, right? Because those are going to keep getting better and better, and the pace at which they're getting better is accelerating. Yeah. So if even if a business isn't quite ready to use its data today, spending that time making sure you have good data, or even before you're collecting data, that you're asking not just abstract questions, but very specific questions about your business, is going to do a whole lot more for you than just trying to learn how to do machine learning or how to use Power BI. Like, those are very important tools that
Right.
can get you that sort of exposure to asking these questions. But in the long run, these tools are going to just keep getting better and better, and you're better off spending a lot of time figuring out what sort of questions does my business need to answer specifically, and what data do I need to be able to support answers to those questions.
Yeah, no, those are great points. The tools are there now. I think back to that project in automotive, and we had to bring in a company. We had to set up servers. We had to set up all kinds of
Not
infrastructure.
anymore.
Oh man, it was tens of thousands of dollars. But the crazy point is, like, Power BI desktop, if you just want to get started, it's a free download. It's, that's how
Yeah.
crazy it's gotten. Like Python, how much is, is it all free? The Python dev tools? Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Python.
Pretty
Yeah.
much, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
So the cost, I think one of the costs is the technical ability. So once you download one of these tools, you got to learn kind of some data modeling techniques and tools. And I'm going to talk about Power BI, some of the secrets about Power BI. And Andrew and Tyler, maybe you can talk about your tools in Python that you use. And Tyler, you've got some Power BI experience too. But I've worked with multiple companies now, and one of the things that's always missing, I think there's a myth out there that you should import and you just use a flat file inside of Power BI. And in terms of scalability, in terms of performance of Power BI, in terms of really unlocking the power, I think it's a disservice to not develop a star schema and do the data table and the lookup tables. If you really want to learn it, and that's why I started developing that class, right, for the secrets of Power BI, is because I'm speaking a different language when people just bring in flat files and it's not scalable. So I want to teach the star schema and stop people from using just flat files and and then develop something that is really going to impact and can scale with the company. And you can tie it to the next project and the next project. And I think the biggest thing is to pick one business process, because that will mean one data table, and then you can do your lookup tables, which is I'm just going to do an example. So let's say the sales process. Who did you sell to? So that's your customer table. That's a lookup table. When was that sale made? So that goes into your calendar table, which is a lookup table. And then just the date stamp is what should go into your data table, and the amount. So the numbers go into your data table, and then the lookup values go into your lookup tables. Kind of they make a star around the data table. So that's what it means to do a star schema. And I just see so many people just pulling a flat file and don't build this out. And then in the future, they can't write measures and they can't analyze the data. So that is my biggest, today for the audience members, that is my biggest secret for Power BI, is if you can learn the star schema and you can build out your star schema with your lookup tables, you will be oodles ahead in terms of the value you can provide to your company. So that's my biggest nugget of knowledge for the audience members today. And I'm developing the class, and I'm going to go back to that. So you want to take the class, it's free. Go back to my, the first slide in this and go to my website and sign up. So Andrew, do you have something to share about, you've had so many experiences with companies now. What is the one piece of knowledge you want to impart to somebody going on this journey? Kind of a business leader.
Yeah. So I think some of it is going to echo a bit of what Tyler was saying, is that these tools are all getting so much better. And one of them that has really made strides in the last 2 years is AutoML. So that's automated machine learning. which kind of sounds a little silly because machine learning is already thought to be somewhat of an automation, right? So how are you automating an automation system? That's
Yeah.
kind of what it is you're literally just taking your flat file, as Charles was describing, and uploading it to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, and they have systems in place that make it super simple to make your first AI model off of whatever data you have in a table, and be able to deploy that so you can use it and test it out within a day even.
Yeah.
So the insight that I would provide is that those tools are getting very easy to use to start dipping your toes in the water and see if what you're trying to accomplish is technically feasible. And one of the best ways to prepare that table that you upload, so in the example that Charles gave, for a sales process, let's say you want to be able to predict, or somewhat forecast how many sales you're going to have next month. You could take your existing record of sales and do some aggregations, maybe that looks to figure out how long you should aggregate could be figured out using some of the visualizations in Power BI, but you can explore your data in Power BI and come up with maybe a couple extra columns of like what are your average daily sales, right, numbers. And those can create new columns that then are included in the flat file then that you compile and upload and say, okay, here are the columns I want you to use as an input. Here's the targeted output value that I know the answer for all of these other records. Give me a model that when I give you a new row that doesn't have the answer, you'll fill in the answer for me. That's just one really quick and easy way to just start testing, does your idea have some legs? Because these automated systems are getting really good at making some very, very basic models.
No, that's a great point. And we have a comment too from Sherry. I couldn't agree more on the lookup tables. I see these missing in files others have built in Power BI. Hard to slice and dice without them. And yeah, and Andrew, like you said, there's some steps. So, let's go back. When we first met, you and I talked about Power BI. There's things inside of Power BI that make it easy to get your initial insights. And it sounds like you're talking about some of these tools, right? So people download Power BI and they're like, oh, I can just drag and drop, from my flat file, boom. And then there's this special implicit measures that just pop up and do their magic, and you get sums or averages or whatever. And then they're like, oh, this is so easy. Why do I need to spend time data modeling or building a star schema, right? And then, so then you do the work, like me, I was like, I'm okay. It's like, well, you got to pick the process, and then you got to figure out who does it and what location and who, what, when, where, why, and you build up the filters and kind of the pivots. They call it filter context, I think, stuff that comes on the pivot. So if you're familiar with pivot tables, so if you build it that way, it takes a little bit of time, but then scalability is really good, right? But there's a kind of a gap. It's like people have made tools to make it easy to get started, and then people get stuck. They're like, oh, but I want to scale this now. And they're like, it was so easy to get that initial insight. Why can't I get to this next step? And I think that goes to Sherry's point is people download it, they get started, they're like, super easy. I don't need to build a data model. And then it collapses on them. And then that's the scary part, is when your project can't scale, can't go to the next level, right? So do you have any experience with that? We'll give Tyler a break. He's got, I think he's on a work call. So I love live calls. Anything can happen. So yeah.
So I just started trying out Power BI a couple months ago because, I've been living in the machine learning world. I've been very curious after we started doing a bunch of Power BI stuff to see if I could use it in my business. And I think one of the really cool things is Excel. I got pretty good at using charts in Excel, but they are such a pain to put together to make some sort of visualization. But it is one of the quickest ways to do it.
Yeah.
till you try out Power BI, and it's literally dragging and dropping stuff from your columns.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of that frustration comes into place, is that, like you said, these early stages of just getting a grip on your data and understanding what's in there and being able to visualize it quickly and iterate that process quickly is so insightful, but then you can't take that next step because you either need to bring in a whole lot more data to generalize it, or you haven't spent that time to build up that data model. And yeah, I that's one of those really frustrating things that I think a lot of businesses deal with, is trying to scale up and, from the machine learning perspective, generalize some of the insights that you're getting. And I think that's where cloud services can end up filling that gap pretty quickly.
No, great points. Yeah, it's so easy to get started, but there are tools, like you said, that are helping now. And then, there's people out there like Sherry that understand the data modeling, the architecture, that can help you get there too. So that's a good point. And then, so we're going to just jump to setting expectations. I think were you the one that brought this up the other day when we had
I don't know.
The barriers to entry are so low now. You can get started with data projects. But just be aware they're not all going to be wins. And then, I've seen a couple of projects where like, this didn't meet my expectations. We didn't get $1 million out of this. Let's cancel all our data projects, right? And I think that's a disservice to the company because, it's kind of like, it's so low risk to get started with data. Just pick the right MVP, get started, and then build off of that and learn off of that and continue to grow with data, right? Because I really, I've seen the light. I think it's a competitive advantage for companies, especially now. Everybody's going online, remote. It's all database now. And the companies that reach that understanding where that light bulb goes off and continue to pursue this, even though there's obstacles in the way, I think are going to be way ahead of everybody else, right? So, any thoughts on that or any stories?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times at the start of a data project, we're looking for answers, right? We may already have some ideas in our head of the questions that we want to try to answer, and then if you start off your data project with the expectation of getting direct, specific answers, I think you're going to end up being disappointed most of the time, because most of the value that I've seen in the majority of projects that I've worked on have come from the data providing not insights into answers, but providing the foundation on which to ask better questions, right? So if you go into a data project looking for a specific answer, you're going to be doing all right. If you go in with an abstract sort of question, you should instead maybe hope for more specific questions to come out of it. So that's where I think you're getting at with the learn from each project.
Yeah.
Most projects should be set up to not only seek learnings from the data, so not necessarily answers, but more specific questions. And then I think the part that a lot of companies miss is at the end of that project, documenting and sharing those learnings in the context of the business, so that way not just the people who are involved in looking at the specifics of the data learn it, but that it becomes general knowledge throughout the greater organization. That sort of information sharing of learnings can be super helpful, not only to the organization, but also for the people running these data projects to be able to communicate the value that these projects bring, instead of keeping that all inside your head or sharing it with your direct reports or manager.
Yeah, no, great points. Sharing the learning, that is the biggest win from these projects, these data projects, because I really think what you do is you take a business process and you do a deep dive and you understand all the steps in the process and the amount of time in between each step, and then the costs of each step, and then you document like scope. This kind of project management 101, but really data is really measuring the steps in a process, and then kind of the cost and the time and the scope in between each of those steps, right? And that's what's really interesting to me is you learn a lot about your processes. A lot of companies don't go through that exercise of stepping through each step in the process. And that's really the first step is, that's my MVP process is when I work with a company, I'd say, we'll just pick one process and let's walk through all the steps that you take. And a lot of times they haven't gone through it. So you walk through those steps and it's like, okay, let's tag them and then bring the data in with your timestamps and let's analyze it. And then, just use a basic calendar table and some basic time intelligence. And that's when these insights start popping up.
Yeah. So the curse of knowledge, right? The more familiar you are with the process, the less you see and maybe even understand about the process, because you kind of let yourself abstract it away. And in doing that, you sort of lose these major touch points that have the largest impact. And I don't know if this is exactly related, but as you were talking, it made me think of probably 2 weeks ago, New Year's. I've got a 10-month-old son, and I sat down, and on New Year's, he can't really understand me, but I thought it'd be a fun exercise to try to explain what New Year's was to him. And that was the most challenging exercise that I have gone through in a while, because he has no concept of time. He has no concept of age and all these other things, right? And trying to explain to him that we have this shared view of what year it is and why that changes, it made me realize that these things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that are just second nature are often these things that we have a hard time communicating, and we often don't even understand. So I think you had an example that you shared in a previous video about paper in a process just walking off and nobody even asking the question of where these papers went. But once you were able to tag things in a system and see every single well-defined step, boom, all of a sudden there's process improvement, tons of time saved, and a big win for the company. So going through what you said, Charles, and actually stepping through and feeling each stage of your processes maybe seems overly time consuming, but is probably one of the most valuable things you can do in getting ready for a data project.
It really is. And then, I have that story. So it was, we went through the invoicing process. And, when the shipment, you boxed up your package and you mailed it. And I was like, well, okay, so what's the timestamp? How do we know that this went out and it's invoiced? And it's like, well, that's not how we invoice. We don't actually track when this particular project leaves our plant. There's another document that goes, from this department to, the accounting department that flags that. And I was like, well, so how do we know, to invoice? It's because this person walks this piece of paper to this basket over here. And, and then we started looking in the process and we started measuring it. And, if one of those people was on vacation, you could go for weeks without invoicing. Or if that piece of paper got lost, you didn't get money, right? Until hopefully that piece of paper found its way back into that bin where it gets invoiced, right? So, that was, I think from an engineering standpoint too, we spent our years of study understanding each step in the process, all the inputs and the outputs, and what happens in between these functions. And I think that has helped me so much in helping companies understand their process, because I was like, oh, how does this piece of paper get to here? And how do we know that it follows this process every time? And what's the time delay? And what's the cost? What's the implications of the time delay? What's the cost impact? And when you study it that way, and then you start looking at the actual numbers, you start realizing where all the bottlenecks and all the gaps are in your processes. So it's really a process question. You pick a process, you understand it, you start measuring to those processes, and you measure the time, the cost, the scope, and then all these insights blossom out of it, right? So, no, great point. And I love that story because, there's still, there's still companies with paper, and we're trying to change that. We're like, there's a better way. You can be more competitive. You can understand your insights. You can understand where all your time is going, where all your money is going. We've been there. We've seen the light. We know how to tell the story. So contact us, and we'll help you out. Right. So
Yeah.
I'll put in a little plug for you too. So AI, go to Andrew, Power BI stuff. Come to me. And Tyler is on a call right now, but he's doing some AI machine learning, specifically on decision intelligence, right? So that's where. So Andrew, we're at an hour mark.
It goes by so fast.
Oh my gosh! So
I don't know if the audience feels the same way, but
yeah. So that was my last slide, but and so I'm starting this class too, and Andrew, maybe we can do a spin-off of this class for people that are interested in Python, and because I don't know if you've ever encountered this, but are there certain things you just want people to know before they come to you? And if you could do a master class for Python and get people introduced to it and offer it for free, and then they take that class, right? And then when they come to you, they kind of speak the same language now. So that's what I'm doing with Power BI for this, for business leaders. And the reason I'm doing it is because I've been binge watching Power BI videos, and a lot of them are geared towards IT professionals, right? And you and I, we're engineers. We moved into kind of business, and we started our own businesses. And then we're like, man, these videos and this all these learnings aren't geared towards somebody like me that's just trying to make a decision, make an impact, make money for the company. So that's what I wanted to do with this class, is give people the baseline, the 80-20 rule, the 20% of what they need to scale their businesses. Not download Power BI desktop and just pull the simple measures. I want them to give the knowledge to scale, to review the process, get an MVP going, and build a data model that can really be architected to grow their business. So so that's my little plug for my class. It's in beta mode. Join me, go sign up on my website. And then Andrew, if you're interested, I think, do you see this being helpful for people that are interested in AI and Python too? I'd still struggle with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. A lot of times when I'm working on a data project with a company that hasn't dealt with data a lot, we end up going over analytics first, right? Because analytics is something that the tools are more developed where you don't have to write as much code or as much interface. You can use a tool like Power BI to generate immense value for your business. So yeah, starting with Power BI and specifically Charles's class to take it just beyond charting your data is a fantastic first step, especially if your long-term plan is to end up somewhere in machine learning and maybe something more data science-y. I'm really glad you're putting on this masterclass, Charles, because I've got this goal this quarter to make a free email course, kind of like a 7-day boot camp for something as well. And I think I'm gonna have to go through your class and see how you do it, because I'm kind of debating between two topics. So maybe if people are still listening in the audience, you can help me figure out which of the two I should do, or maybe suggest a third. We talked about auto machine learning as a natural progression from just the analytics. But there is some technical skill involved and some terminology to go through, and that might make for a great 7-day, free email walkthrough course. The other one is another passion of mine, which is business model innovation. So much more on the business side. Not many businesses have really run through a business model innovation process. You've done product innovation, you've done process innovation, but when you want to look at the company a little bit more holistically and make small changes to unlock large value, there's some pretty well defined and easy to use processes to rediscover a new business model. So that's another one I'm interested in maybe doing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So let's partner up. We can do, people can join this class, and then at the end, we're like, you know what, if you want to go a little further and you get into AI, you join Andrew's class and we'll sweep right in there, and you can get all this knowledge all in one path, right? And you can decide halfway if you want to continue or where you sit.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that'd be awesome. So I'm gonna end this so that our audience members can go do other things with their day. Hopefully this was useful, and go take Andrew's survey, and I'm gonna probably send out surveys more for the audience members too.
Yeah.
I've found my audience doesn't engage typically on the live shows. What's really interesting is they like to engage afterwards. So I'll get emails afterwards with them. So I watch for those. Email me, message me on LinkedIn, and tell me what you want for the next show. And I'm making this masterclass. It's going to happen. That's one of my goals. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and we're going to end on that. But I'm going to end on one thing we discussed before the show, and you have talked about. You've done business data. You've analyzed the business data, rail data. I've worked automotive. I've worked renewable. I've worked water utility. I've worked coupons for Dermalogica, which is data. They do lotions, I think, right? So one of the misconceptions is, that we have to have domain knowledge. We have to be in the industry to help somebody. But that's so far from the truth, I think, because we depend on the person with the domain knowledge to tell us the process. And once we know the process, we can build a data model to help them analyze their data, right? So that's one of the big misconceptions is, I think behind the scenes, the data, the infrastructure is all the same. The data model, it's just a process with steps in between. If you have somebody that understands the process and gives it to somebody like you or me, we can take that data and give you insights, right? So
yeah, the domain knowledge is so important, and sometimes it can really help to have somebody who doesn't have domain knowledge like us ask really dumb questions.
Yeah. We're going to ask dumb questions because we want to learn all the gaps. And like you said, you understand that process so well, you don't dig into the little nitty-gritty details, or you make some assumptions and abstractions so that, and then we come in and we can say, well, that doesn't make sense. What do you do in this step? Or what's the input and what's the output? And that leads to all kinds of insights sometimes. So sometimes it's good to have somebody from the outside who knows data modeling and processes, combine that with the domain knowledge, and then you become a really powerful team and get some great insights. Yep. So, all right. So it looks like Tyler's back. Tyler,
right at the end.
Yeah, right at the end.
Right, right.
So 107. So we're way over our time. So any last thoughts or any last comments? Do you want the audience to comment or add anything to this, or do you have one quick story that you want to impart that you wish they knew?
Oh man, now I really feel on the spot.
Yeah. I like to do that. That's my job.
Context switch too, right?
I use my pass. Maybe I would emphasize again, start small. Really sit down with leadership to understand their vision for what they feel data is and how it may help the organization, because they're typically not technical people, right? The business leaders aren't going to always know what data exists, what the quality is. They just know that data is out there, right? And it's this abstract concept of data is powerful and useful, and we have a bunch of it, so now go use it. And it's really the responsibility of data professionals to provide education, right, documentation, be able to communicate effectively that, yes, data is out there. Typically, it's very, very uncleanly, and it takes time to really tease out the right insights from it. And that can take time and investment. So really start small, build a project that's easily scalable, it's simple, it's something that can derive a seemingly boring insight, but something that you can take action on and build out from, rather than trying to go for the grail right from the get-go. you may be disappointed.
Yeah. Oh, great stuff. Yeah, start small, start simple, understand the vision. Those are all great points. And just hang on real quick. We're going to end the broadcast and then go into our private chat again. But my last insight is, learn how to tell the story or pick a data story, right? And I'm getting into sales and marketing and storytelling on YouTube, and stories stick with people. And if you have a data story, the epiphany story, the hero's journey, those are so powerful. Like my story about saving tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, that changed my life. Those are the stories. And and Andrew, you brought up the paper story, right? I told that story months ago, but you remember that. So story with impact, with huge impact, data can make that impact. And once you get those stories and you experience this, remember those stories and carry them forward, because they're so influential and they're going to change the world. These stories that we collect. So, we're going to leave now. Thanks, audience members. So email any of us with, so we're going to try to do this every 2 weeks and provide great value. But to provide great value, we need your input. So if you watch this to the end here, send us, fill out Andrew's survey, Tyler, if you put out a survey, or just email us and let us know what you want to see, because we want to make more great content and change people's lives, right? So, all right, adios, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
See ya.
Yep.